I should like to invite your attention to the book of St. Luke, the 15th chapter, the 13th verse. And may I give you Philip's translation of this passage. Before very long, the younger son collected all his belongings and went off to a foreign land where he squandered his wealth in the wildest extravagance. Runaway child running wild. Runaway Child Running Wild is the title of a popular song that was made popular by the Temptations. Its words are a profound presentation of the problems of many of our youth today. We do not have to make any kind of apology or explanation for using these words from a Christian pulpit, nor in a Christian service of worship, for they are a sermon within themselves. Harry Emerson Fosdick says that preaching is the preacher wrestling with the problem, or rather with the people, over problems of life and death. The problems of our youth today are certainly problems of life and death. And this song presents that problem. To a class of theological students at Garrett Theological Seminary in the system of Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, the late Dr. Ernest Fremont Tittle, who was said to be the greatest preacher in all Methodism, quoting and commenting on the words of Dr. Harry Emerson Fosdick, who is not only the greatest preacher in all Baptism, before although he is retired, was declared to be the greatest preacher of the last 100 years.
Take your time.
Dr. Fosdick, as we know, was the pastor of Riverside Church in New York City, one of the richest churches financially in the world. Yet Dr. Fosdick did not take advantage of that fact. He could have received a salary of $1 million a year or more if he would have accepted it. He could have had a chauffeur-driven Rolls Royce and other cars besides if he had accepted them, but he never owned an automobile in his life.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
He was concerned about the problems of people.
Preacher.
And commenting on Dr. Fosdick's definition of preaching, Dr. Ernest Fremont Tittle said to his large class of theological students, before you preach a sermon, first ask yourself the question, is this a matter of life and death? And if you don't find that it is a matter of life and death, don't preach it. The problems of our youth today are a matter of life and death. The matter of a runaway child running wild is a matter of life and death.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The matter of so-called youth delinquency is a matter of life and death.
Big bang, preacher.
The matter of youth rebellion is a matter of life and death. The matter of the teenage problem is a matter of life and death.
Watch it now.
The matter of students' revolts, protests, and etc. On college and university campuses is a matter of life and death.
Say it, preacher.
The departure of the prodigal son from his father's house was a matter of life and death.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
For when he returned, his father said, "My son was lost and is found, was dead, but now he is alive."
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Jesus was preaching extraordinarily when he spoke the parable of the man who had two sons.
All right.
And when we think of the prodigal son, we think of a country home,
Let me hear you now.
a home nestled on the hillside and fanned by the evening breeze,
That's it.
a home out in the country where art is born
Yeah.
and nature drinks from the fountain of the beautiful, a home where the sun is seen by day and the moon and the stars are seen by night.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
When we think of the prodigal son, we think of a country home where it is recognized and realized that the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth forth his handiworks. A home where birds are seen and heard chirping on their song,
Preacher.
and are seen splitting the air with their wings. A home where trees are seen standing up and looking at God all day
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
and lifting their leafy arms to pray. A home where with cows fattening in the stalls, cattle grazing upon the hillside,
Yes, sir.
sheep in the meadow. Help me here. Chickens cackling around the barnyard. Dogs barking around the house. And roosters crowing in the morning. This is the situation at the country home. And my brothers and my sisters, it was such a home that the prodigal son was born and lived.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And it was from such a home that he gathered together all he had and took his journey into a far country.
Yes, sir.
His father was a multimillionaire
Yes, sir.
and had provided for the younger son and his elder brother before they were born. Yet he collected all his belongings
Yeah.
and went off to a foreign land
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
where he squandered his wealth in the wildest extravagance.
That's it.
He said to his father, "Give me the portion of good that falleth to me."
Come on, sir.
And you know, the cry of almost all youth is, give me. Most of them who come up in well-to-do or wealthy circumstances feel that the world, or at least their parents, owes them a living. Their philosophy is, what is yours is mine. I will take it. All parents owe their children the best start in life they can give them. We recognize that fact. But the parents should be careful not to make their children parasites without initiative and unable to struggle and strive toward maturity. For in almost cases, the children are going to face the problem of making it for themselves. Well, they themselves will one day become parents and be obligated to provide for their own children. They will be obligated to assume the responsibility of becoming citizens of their community, their state and nation, and citizens of the world. Wish I had some help here. However, the prodigal son had a sense of independence. He had a sense of venturesomeness. He wanted to go forth and see the world. We cannot criticize him for that. He wanted to take what he had and make it for himself. He wanted to experience life for himself. However, he made the mistake of not investing what he had in abundance, but squandering it in the wildest extravagance. Perhaps he was handicapped by the fact that he had not worked for what he had. Thus, he did not know the value of it. He had never had to save for a rainy day. Having been used to a plenty in his father's house, he did not have the foresight to save. Being ignorant and inexperienced as he was, he did not think before he acted. And anybody will make a regrettable mistake and suffer miserable consequences if he does not think before he acts. Well, Lord help me tonight. The prodigal is to be commended for his sense of venturesomeness. He learned more by going away than he would have learned by staying at home. Although he learned it painfully and bitterly. He is to be commended for his sense of sharing. But he learned the lesson of the old song which says, don't take everybody to be your friend. When he had spent everything, a famine arose in that country. And for when he had spent everything, he began to be in want. It seemed that some of the friends with whom he should have been able to share with. They forsook him in time of famine. However, the prodigal was not a beggar. He was not a parasite. He went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into the fields to feed pigs. The fact that the citizens sent him out to feed pigs indicates that he was not among his own kind of people, that his employer was not a Jew and did not know the ways and customs of Jews. Not only that, for Jews hated pigs as most of us hate snakes. To them, a pig was as vile as the most abominable thing they knew. But the young man was courageous enough to feed the swine and to try to eat the food they ate. Jesus says that the young man was reflective to think of home. He was reflective enough to remember that his father had bread enough and enough to spare. He was wise enough to make a decision and say, I will arise and go home to my father. And after he willed to do so, he arose and went on back home. The prodigal was a runaway child, but he was wise enough to recollect the security of his father's house. And he willed and went back home. Thank God the prodigal was wise enough to remember his father. Oh, he was wise enough to go back home. He was wise enough to admit and confess that he had made a mistake, that he had sinned before God and before heaven. Whatever sin we commit is before God and against God and against heaven. The modern teenager does not think that he has wronged anybody. He thinks that all older people, including his parents, are fools and have sinned against him. In fact, he calls them squares. He does not know enough to know that all of life is four square. That it takes a square even to make a circle. When we think of a runaway child, we think of the young fools of every age. They always think that they have more sense than their elders. They always run away, not knowing where they're going, without any sense of direction. They always hate the ones who love them. More than a generation ago, it was considered wise to be a school dropout. The dropouts laughed at those who continued in school.